what's subject to fractional reserves, and they will have a sub-account that is not subject to fractional reserves. And this other, I should probably explain this real quick. This is left over from the Monetary Act of 1980 that controlled, reduced really the reserve requirements. Net transaction accounts is more or less, to keep it simple, checking accounts or now accounts. And that was set to 10%. And non-transaction accounts, which would be time deposits, like if you have a CD or a savings account, was eventually dropped to 0. So even right now, there's a 0% on savings accounts. So what that means is when you give the money to the bank, they can do whatever the heck they want with it. If it's in a checking account, what they will do is this deposit reclassification trick, and literally every day they can change the amount that they want. So this whole problem is, and helped lead to the financial crisis and really the depression that we're in currently. And I do have an article on this that's all sourced, but if you take a look at the banking system before or just before the breakdown, you had roughly the FDIC reported domestic deposits was about I believe that's, I want to say this. That was that would be $7 trillion. The monetary base was $800 billion, and the total reserves that were required, or that the banks had, was $45 billion. So they were really at, if you divide this number by that number, they were at about less than 1% reserves, and that's a rough estimate. It's not going to be exactly correct. But by the middle of July 2009, when the Federal Reserve pumped in $800 billion of liquidity or of new money, most of this just went into jacking up the total reserves of the system. So on paper they look better because they just filled in the hole. And the monetary base expanded by $800 billion, and lo and behold, the estimated reserve ratio is once again over 10%. So that is something that's not completely well known, but this is pretty much what we've been under since roughly the last 10 years or so. And then lastly, I'd like to go a little bit into, well, one slide on how the Fed causes the depressions. And the way that this works is what they call it is the Austrian theory of the boom-bust cycle. And the way that the Federal Reserve creates this is that they control the interest rates, and what they'll end up doing is they'll drop interest rates, which will lead to a boom. And by doing this, they'll create a whole bunch of credit that businesses will go out and expand with. They'll lengthen the structure of production, which is another way of saying is, instead of providing consumer goods, they'll try and provide goods and services, or if you think of it as like R&D over a longer time window. But unfortunately, what's happening is what these things are called is also malinvestments. And these malinvestments are these entrepreneurs have gone out there, they've started a business or what have you, and there's no customers for it because there's no savings left. And what ends up occurring is you have this crash. So we have the boom and then the tech stock crash. Then during 9/11 we had the boom in the housing market. Then we had the final bust, and this actually ends in I believe April 2009. But this is pretty much just a straight line out here for a little bit longer. And what we have right now is a depression. Eventually, what we have right now in the Treasury market is this giant bubble. So the Treasury bubble, which is another way of saying the dollar, will go into crisis eventually. All right, so that's kind of the sad stuff. And the whole thing is, how do you restore sound money? And what you can't quite see here is, I gave a talk in Philadelphia last year about this time that went into a lot of detail on how to transition from what we currently have back to sound money. And some of the ideas that is there is, to open the mint to free coinage of gold and silver, to remove all taxes on the exchange of gold and silver. Currently, there's capital gains taxes and that sort of thing. So they just try to make it more difficult to trade. Revoke and forbid legal tender laws, because again, the whole problem is that the government tells you that you must use this little slip of paper as money. Then what we really need to do is to help drive debate on a new monetary system. And what I believe that entails is to phase out the Federal Reserve and and again, this is a proposal that I have, but the way that I believe that would work out best, very simply, is you phase out the Federal Reserve, move everything back to Congress for a certain period of time, and you really don't gain too much by that. Like the currency would still be, fiat currency would still be unbacked, but what you would gain is you wouldn't have the bankers sending all this money elsewhere, and you'd have transparency to the American people. And then what you could move on from there is you could phase out Federal Reserve notes and have United States notes that are issued for a certain period of time. Meanwhile, by doing all these things, what it all comes down to is that the people should be deciding what is money, not the government. And when you allow people to trade freely, the market will eventually correct itself, and eventually what would most likely happen is these fiat notes would be phased out over a period of time. So I'd be happy to take questions on this. This will be up on my website, which is Towne with an E, forcongress.com, probably by Monday. And as Amanda had mentioned, I was wondering if I could just, is it okay for like 2 more minutes?
Oh yeah, keep going.
Okay.
As long as you
I'll finish up real quick here with 2 slides. One is to highlight the difference between Keynesian economics and Austrian economics. And in Keynesian economics, and we have, you know, Mr. John Maynard Keynes here with one of his famous quotes, and some of his quotes are pretty darn funny, but in the long run, we're all dead. And the whole idea of Keynesian economics is that the money power belongs to the government and to the bankers. It does not belong to the people. The government commands the economy, which now is finally into the open over the last 2 years since the TARP banker bailout, the purchase of GM, and all the auto industry and the banker bailouts. They're renowned for deficit spending. They usually can't balance a budget, and the whole idea is, well, you know, if you're in a depression, the government needs to spend a lot more to bring us out of the depression. And also stealing by currency debasement, which is another word of saying, you know, for inflation, you print up money. It makes everybody else's dollars worth less. They redistribute wealth to the military-industrial complex, which funds our wars. Banking cartels, special interest groups, and corporations. It allows and rationalizes the government to take over private businesses. And it also, and a lot of times, you might say, well, it's the free market or it's capitalism, but only really in word. In true, indeed, what it really functions as is either crony capitalism or vulture capitalism or the corporatocracy or disaster capitalism. It has nothing to do with the true free market. Austrian economics, and one of the, I would say, probably one of the last greatest economists of the last century was Ludwig von Mises. I studied there in 2009, and you can go to the website, which is mises.org, MISES.org, for anyone interested. And they have a ton of audio, and I think Joe, you actually mentioned this as well. Free books you can just download. They're in PDF, but if you can read off of the computer, it's okay, or you can order the books as well in print. But in Austrian economics, the people own the money power. It's not the government that has ownership of this. The government plays no role in government planning, in economic planning. They do have a role in the rule of law, and making sure that, you know, acts of fraud and aggression and murder and the such are responded to. But also promotes honest money and balanced budgets, and it highly rewards those who create wealth and shares it with everyone, instead of having these select cartels. Government, no way, or will never take over private businesses. There's absolutely no need for this. And will also promotes free market capitalism and laissez-faire, which is French for let them be economics. Like the markets will always clear. They don't need the government messing things up. And when you go, you know, through the last decade and back even further, government tends to do exactly the same opposite things to prolong this depression. So instead of having a very, you know, short and possibly fairly sharp recession, we have this long, drawn-out and delayed depression. And we aren't going to get out of it until we start changing things, and that's why it's so very important to spread information and you know, share these things. And that's why it's very much an honor and privilege to be talking to a group that is very much an activist organization. So thank you very much for your time.
or how long was the
It
drive?
was just 5 hours.
Just 5 hours, yeah, not too bad, right? But at least you didn't have to go through airport security.
Yes.
Joe did.
We'll have that eventually.
Yeah, maybe turnpike security,
Yeah.
right?